to recording because that's important. And I think we're ready. Okay, so hey y'all.
Hey.
This is a conversation about the importance of voting, and I will defer to my friend Layle in a moment to give us a little bit more background about why we are all here together. But this is actually a conversation between friends because most of us are already connected in one way or another. And I'm glad to be here with my friends today to talk about this really big thing. Sort of an overview of our time together. There'll be a welcome, some introductions, some agreements, our dialogue, and then if there are questions from anybody watching us live, we will address those. We'll wrap up, and we'll do that all in enough time to get you out of here to be there for the versus Gladys Knight versus Patti LaBelle. We will not be here all night. If you are simultaneously trying to watch the Saints game, I'm sorry to interrupt your game, but it is what it is. Thank you for being here in addition to or instead of Who Dat. As I stated before, my name is Tracy J. I am the founder of The Quiet Rebel, and the intent of The Quiet Rebel is to incrementally and organically shift the status quo using conversations as instruments for change. How that has been showing up in the world for the last few months is through a guided conversation called 100 Voices, where we talk about race and culture. And today I am excited to be able to guide this conversation that is about the importance of voting. And now I would like to introduce you to our hostess with the mostest, my friend of 3 decades, Layle McKelvey.
A long time, very long time. So I'm Layle. I'd like to welcome you to the Omicron Psi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated's guided conversation around the importance of voting. So this event aligns with our voter engagement week of activities. We're working across the entire sorority to register and mobilize voters into action. And so the conversationalists that we have for you are awesome. They're revered, refined, and well-known throughout our local Houston area. And they're certainly qualified to speak on these subjects. So with that, I'm gonna let them get to it and put myself on mute because you don't wanna hear from me, we wanna hear from them for sure. Thanks.
Okay, so in this order, I would like to invite our panelists, our conversationalists to introduce themselves. When you introduce yourself, if you will please, tell us your claim to fame, Houston or otherwise, and the one word that comes to mind when I say the word vote. Jeff, you're up first.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I'm Jeffrey L. Boney. I am a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, New Chapter, Northside Qs, and I'm also associate editor of the historic Houston Forward Times newspaper, who's celebrating 60 years this year. And lastly, I serve as a council member for the city of Missouri City, Texas, and was just reelected for my 2nd term. When I think of the word vote, I think of necessary.
Thank you. Kelly.
Hi, how's everyone? I am Kelly P. Hodges, and I am currently the executive director of the Houston Texans YMCA. I'm also the owner of Hodges Communications Group, and I am newly elected board member, Spring Independent School District. Thank you so much for having me. When I think about vote, I think of it as a requirement. The word requirement comes to mind.
Thank you. And Roxanne.
Hi, my name is Roxanne Werner. I am the Director of Community Relations for the Harris County Clerk's Office. My pronouns are she, her. The Clerk's Office is responsible for actually administering the election in Harris County, which is the 3rd largest county in the entire country. So we are in busy season The word that comes to my mind when I first think about vote is responsibility.
Thank you. So if you have ever attended a Quiet Rebel event, you know that there are some agreements that we operate under in order to keep our conversation running smoothly. And they are these. We start with love. And the love is an acronym. L is listen with your heart. Sometimes we show up in conversations around sometimes difficult subjects or sometimes important subjects, and we show up in our head space. But I'm inviting us to show up with our hearts first today. The O is to observe or be aware of your own biases or the lens through which you see the world, because that colors the way we respond to things. V is to venture into unfamiliar territory, which this may or may not be unfamiliar territory, but you know, who knows what we might encounter. Let's just be willing to do so if we are. And the E is expect the best and assume best intentions. Like I said earlier, this is a conversation amongst friends. However, I have found that these are good guide rules for any conversation, whether we are already liking and loving the people we're talking to or not. And a few other ground rules, agreements: speak in first person. So our questions that we answer are about us. And so we answer from the position of myself as opposed to global or general statements. Prepare for non-closure, because there are going to be some people who disagree probably with some of the things we have to say today, and we aren't going to fix all the problems of the world today. That's okay. Share and then invite. That is a rhythm that makes this an ongoing invitation, so that when I ask a question, I'll invite somebody to answer it, and then they will invite the next person. And then the last sort of agreement that we come to is that this is a safe and brave conversation. Nothing that I'm going to ask today should make anybody feel unsafe. However, I just want to put that understanding out there that if anytime I invite you to a space, I intend for it to be safe, and I also intend for it to be brave. And I say brave because sometimes when we say safe, we assume that the things we hear or feel will feel good to us, which is not always true. But in the absence of feeling safe, we should still show up brave. Okay, so this is an icebreaker that I tend to do with groups, large or small. And it's just a way for us to like get past the awkwardness of getting started. And so there are a few statements here. Layle, I'm gonna ask you to participate in this one too, please, ma'am. And so there are a few statements here that are yes, if. And so if the prompt that you see next applies to you, please say yes. And if you are on Facebook and the prompt applies to you, you can say yes there as well. So the first one, yes, if you are originally from Houston.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, if you were born before 1968. Yes, if you have children.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, if you're a good dancer. Yes. Depends on who you ask, but yes. You went to sleep before 9 p.m. last night. Or you ate breakfast this morning.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let me stop my share. So now we're going to hop into our questions. And like I said, I will invite each of us, invite the first person to answer the question, and then they will extend the invitation forward. Layle and I are here, and we will participate if we're invited. If you don't invite us, then we will move on to the next question. All right. All right. So the first question is, what do you most remember about your first time voting? And I'm going to invite Kelly to answer that first.
Oh, what I remember about my first experience was the excitement. I actually voted for the first time as a freshman in college. When I left Houston for college, I just turned 18. So I actually voted in the election to re-elect State Representative Cleo Fields, which in the state of Louisiana was huge at that time. So I just remember the excitement. I remember being new on campus and how we mobilized as an organization. That was my first time being engaged with the NAACP. So it was really an exciting time. And I think that was the catalyst for my community engagement as well. I invite Layle to the conversation.
So similar story, because I was 18 and at college at Sam Houston State, and a group of us hopped in, our friend's car and went to vote, and it was a big deal for us because we had actually all registered to vote in the city where we were so that we could make an impact. So we've, been rebels for a long time. So that was my experience, and I will invite Mr. Boney.
All right. Well, I recall my first time voting. It was actually I had attended the University of Oklahoma, and I came home to go to Texas Southern University. I had not voted when I initially went to college, but I started learning more and more about it. But when I got to TSU and started paying attention to local politics and people saying you need to vote, I figured, hey, why not get involved and engaged? I didn't really fully understand everything at the time about the importance of voting and why I was actually doing it. I just was kind of told you need to. And so I jumped out there. Then along the way, the more I started educating myself on it and participating in the process, I learned more and more about it. And so I'm here today and I'm like the biggest advocate for voting to this day. Of course I have to do that, to get people to vote for me to get reelected. I really appreciate the importance of voting. I guess I'll pass it on now to Roxanne.
I voted for the first time in the 2008 presidential election. I was a student at U of H. And what I really, really remember about it was actually figuring out where and when to vote, because I heard about early voting, and I remember being like, okay, can anyone vote early? Like, do you have to qualify to vote? Like, is it like a VIP thing? Like you get, and I did, so I did some research on my own, and it turns out the answer is like anybody can vote early. And I voted at the Fiesta Mart over on Kirby. And I do have a very vivid memory of like standing in an aisle of food and like looking at like pickles or olives or some kind of jarred food and being like, is this normal? Like, is this how, is this like how you vote? Like, I don't know why I thought it would be more like at a school or something. And so now in my work at the clerk's office, we do deal with a lot of the polling locations, and, my job is to get information out to the voters. And I can, now that I'm thinking about it, like see a very clear line to that, because I do remember being like, okay, I feel like this is a silly question that I should know how, like literally how to vote. And I have to figure it out. And so I definitely remember feeling like there's some homework to be done. So I'll pass it back to you, Tracy.
Thank you. My family used to go vote together. Like we voted at the elementary school in our neighborhood. And so I remember even before I was able to vote, going with my parents, with them to vote. And then when it was my turn, like all of us going around the corner to the elementary school and standing in the line and voting together. So it's a family affair around these parts. Thank you all for that. The next question is, and I'll start because I already sort of answered this question. Who in your life taught you the significance of voting? And for me, it was my parents. But even before my parents, my grandparents, both of my grandmothers worked at elections. They, registered voters. They sat at the tables. They welcomed the voters. It was always a thing. And my parents in my lifetime that I know of have not missed any elections. And so it was the way that we engaged civically. And so that has always been my truth. And I would like to invite Roxanne to start us.
I think it probably would be my dad. One thing too, kind of to what, Jeffrey just mentioned about being elected. My dad's worked for constable, which is an elected official in different forms in Jefferson County since I was a kid. And so I remember kind of like watching him and his different bosses like talk about elections and like get elected and that kind of thing. But my whole life too, my dad has really, and not just instilled an idea that I should have my voice heard, I think, but like activated me. I remember when I was younger, my dad would listen to talk radio a lot. And if there was something on the radio and I'd have this opinion, he would be like, you know what? Yeah, you've got a good point here. And then hand me the phone and I would like call into a radio station, which probably really threw them for a loop. But we were talking about it recently and he was like, I think the first thing I ever did that with was a dress code, which is something today I still have lots of thoughts on a dress code. But I think it's just one piece of a long-standing empowerment to like have that, like I have opinions and I'm gonna let you know about them. And for me, voting is something that I never miss because I need everybody to know all of my opinions. And I feel like voting is one of the ways that I do that. Oh, I'm going to pass it over to Kelly.
For me, I think I don't ever recall there being like this family conversation about voting. I think it was just always understood. My grandparents worked the polls. I'm from a small town in Illinois, St. Louis. So election time, I mean, it was just a no-brainer. When I turned 18, I registered to vote and I knew that it was my obligation to do that. And as I got older, before my grandparents passed away, I can remember having conversations with them about the election and just being glad that my grandmother was here. When President Obama was elected, I remember having a very long conversation with her about that and about our family and the importance of voting and them coming from Mississippi and all the issues that they had trying to vote in Mississippi. So it was just always understood that when I turned 18, I was to register to vote. And I'll turn it over to Jeffrey Boney.
Man, I hear these stories about family and civic duty and things like that. And I wish I had a story like that, to be honest. Unfortunately, that's not my story. I wish I could say my parents, my grandparents, or any of my family members encouraged me to vote. As a matter of fact, I can't recall one time seeing my parents or my grandparents or aunts, uncles going to the polls to vote. And growing up in the hood, South Park, 3rd Ward, even with my closest friends, none of their parents ever talked about voting. And, it was never a conversation piece in the neighborhood. We were talking about survival and other ancillary things. So, again, for me, going to college and being exposed to politics and people that were engaged in it and encouraging us to do so is what motivated me to finally get engaged and involved. But so many young people like myself and maybe, others who are listening probably did not get exposed to those conversations. And that's not a topic of conversation. Same thing with church. I mean, I didn't go to church for the first time until I was 14. So those types of things, impacted me, I think, early on. I think that if I would have learned a little bit more about voting and the political process and other things like that, public policy at an early age, then I probably would have avoided some of the decisions that I made. And then, of course, would have been able to encourage others. So I'll pass it on to Ms. Layle, who wants to remain quiet.
I do. I thought I was going to remain quiet. It's okay. So for me, my civic engagement really started in college. I know that my mom would vote, and I'm pretty sure consistently, but mainly in the big elections, but not necessarily, I don't know if she voted consistently in the midterm elections. So those are super important because we, especially now, I think as a parent of a son, you got this, 20, I'm in denial, he's 20-something year old boy out driving, in the street. And so the judges that he could end up in front of, and like you, Roxanne, talked about the constables and all these people that are getting elected along the way, those are some that we also really need to pay attention to. So I didn't realize the significance of that until much later. But I think I've always been civic minded and always cared about it. And I've always said, let's vote, let's vote. You know, it's blood, sweat, and tears on that voter registration card. It's a big deal. People died for this. Heads have been bashed in. Folks have been, you know, hit with billy clubs for this to happen for us. So it's a big deal, and it's very important to all of us. And when I hear someone say that they're not going to vote, I'm just like, oh my God, you need to at least exercise this right. You have a right to choose who we have in elected office, and it makes such a big difference in the lives of all of us. So I invite Tracy.
All right, so we're on to our next question. And so this question can be long or short. The question is voting a right or a privilege? And expound however you feel. Is voting a right or a privilege? And I will ask Jeff to start us off, please.
I would venture to say both and. I believe it's a privilege afforded to us to be able to do based off of some of the things Layle just even talked about. I mean, you know, I think about, you know, the Civil Rights Memorial in Alabama. And I think about the fact that there are individuals who actually were murdered for getting people registered to vote, for actually choosing to organize individuals to get them to the polls or get them registered. And the names of those individuals at that Civil Rights Movement Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, you know, talks about these martyrs, these individuals who shed blood for that right. And you think about how far we've come in a country where even with our Constitution of the United States that deemed African Americans 3/5 of a person, and the fact that we didn't have any voting rights, and then, you know, you fast forward hundreds of years, and now we have that right to vote, or, you know, again, I say a right to vote because you're an American citizen. And that's one of the parts of our country that allows American citizens to cast a vote, to participate in democracy. And so, but I think it's also a privilege because, you know, there's so many things that, you know, we're impacted by with these elected officials. You know, when we make decisions as elected officials, we impact you, especially at the local level. I think it was Tip O'Neill that once says all politics is local. And so many times we focus on the big fish, talk about the presidency or the governor, but, you know, it's your city council people, it is your mayors, it is your county commissioners, it is your school board trustees. All of these individuals are making an impact not only on your children's education or on your, you know, your ability to, you know, when you go to the courts, like Layle mentioned, judges, you know, whether it's divorce court or whether it's, you know, family court, you know, dealing with your children. You have children juvenile court that impacts so many young people, especially people of color these days. You know, you have now with the switch in Harris County, bail reform has now been, you know, instituted. You know, there's so many things that voting does that impacts the day-to-day lives of each and every individual, particularly on a local level. So, you know, it's both a right and a privilege, and I think everybody should exercise both that right and privilege. Okay,
so did Jeff say it all, or do we need him to invite somebody else?
Oh, I would like to be invited to this.
Okay.
All right, yes.
Please, Jeff, invite Roxanne to the conversation.
I am inviting Roxanne. I want to drop the mic moment.
You did, but you never do. It just happened. That's why we love you.
It does, and you know it too. I am gonna pull up my own seat because I feel very, very strongly that voting is a right flat out, and I say that because the right to vote is only as good as access to the polls is. And a lot of times the concept of voting being a privilege is used to limit access to that vote. And I do definitely agree to, you know, we live in a democracy, and that in itself is a privilege. But, you know, I hear an argument a lot too, where, you know, when people say, well, why do we need extra days of early voting? You know, it's a privilege. You've got what you've got. Why do we need to expand vote by mail? Voting is a privilege. Get yourself out on a random day and take your time off of work, get in your car and drive to go vote. Well, what if you don't have a car? What if you can't, you know, what if you have a disability? What if you're visually impaired? And I think that, so to me, I stand very firmly in the fact that it is a right, because rooting into that means that that right needs to be accessible, and we need to fight for that accessibility for people who it is harder to vote for. Because for me, voting's pretty easy. I have a car, I have the proper ID, I also am very well versed in my rights, right? But if I have a disability, or I rely on public transportation, or I'm trans, or I maybe don't speak English very well, like those are all things that could be barriers. And with something that we constitute as a right, it means we should be meeting all of those barriers. And I think that a lot of times that idea that it is a privilege that is granted to certain people who are the right kind of voters is used as a way to impede people who maybe, you know, aren't the right kind of voters. And so that to me is something that I feel very strongly about, that language in the way that it gets used. So which is why I just had to add that amendment on there.
No, that's amazing. Can I chime in briefly?
Absolutely.
I just want to say that, you know, I think it's a privilege only because you think about third world countries and other places that don't have rights. They don't have the right to do something. We're governed by a constitution and other laws that give us rights. And then, of course, it's important for us to hold elected officials accountable to ensuring that our rights are protected and our rights are restored, or our rights are never taken away in the first place. But in some third world countries, they don't have rights. They can't make the statement that you just made, Roxanne, about
absolutely
our rights be honored and whatnot. So that's why I feel like we live in as flawed as our country is, we do live in the best country in the world. And I believe that it can only get better by ensuring that our rights are protected.
So I absolutely agree. Living in a democracy is an absolute privilege, and let's keep it that way. Looking at you, Electoral College.
Well, we got to vote on November the 3rd.
And I was going to comment, I really think that it's definitely a privilege, but I also think that in our country, it's a privilege that we often take for granted. And I think it's better.
Thank you. And that will segue us nicely into our next question, which is, what would you share with people who don't intend to vote? And I'll ask Kelly to start.
Ooh, I saw that question. I just thought, the conversation could go wrong real quick. So I have to try to, I have zero tolerance for that attitude. I know everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but just as we've talked about how people have fought for us to have the right and the privilege to vote. So to hear someone say that, I don't understand it. So then I have to talk about how voting impacts everything that we do. Our schools, our nonprofit organizations, the community services that are provided, mental health. I mean, then the idea that someone would actually say that they won't vote, I just say to them, you not voting is hurting more than you walking to the polls and casting your vote. And that's it. I just don't even entertain that conversation. I can't process, because I can't process it. And I've tried. I try to say, well, let me put myself in your shoes. I can't even process it. I can't process it. So I'll turn the question over to Roxanne.
I have a couple of things that I would offer to someone who isn't intending to vote. The first two are because you kind of break it into two arguments of why people don't vote. The first one is that you don't think it matters. In November of 2019, we had a slate of local races, right? Y'all remember that? Mayor, we voted for city council. We had a city council position in District H that in this city with millions of people, that vote was decided by 16 votes, 16. So we have these, and that's not that unusual. We have races that are decided by 10, 20, 30 votes all the time, especially the closer down you get. If your municipality district, and you don't even know what that means, if they've got something on the ballot, your vote literally could make or break millions of dollars in funding. The other thing too is Harris County is so big. We have about 2.5 million registered voters. 2.5 million is more than some states. Like our ability right now in Harris County, like we are a powerhouse and we should act like it. Like you earn this vote and we change history. We earn this vote for the presidency. You earn this vote for Senate. You know, the idea too, the race between, you know, Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz was so high profile. And although Ted Cruz won, nobody thought that they were going to have to touch Texas. Ted Cruz thought that he could come down, he not even have to come down here, that he could wave and go, I'm Ted Cruz, and that he was just going to get reelected. A competitive state is good for democracy. And when you have Harris County really recognize the power of our voice, we have the ability to change the state and to change the country if we want it. And that's huge. I mean, I think maybe sometimes people don't realize how many people live here. Other states aren't like this. Like other states will just have random cities that have 2.5 million voters. That's a lot. And we can change things, and we shouldn't be taken for granted. And then too, when you have competitive, you have those elected officials that tend to pay a little more attention. And the other one too is I know a lot of people sometimes think I can't vote for whatever reason. Maybe I don't have the right photo ID. Maybe I don't know where to go vote. Maybe I tried one time and I got turned away, so I'm discouraged. And that too, I do want to say is like this year, this election in Harris County, we have more access than we've ever had before. If you think that you don't have, you can have, there's like I mean, not to get too into the weeds, but there's 7 different IDs you can have. And if you don't have an ID, you can bring your electric bill in with you. Not all people know that. Things like if your, you know, grandmother maybe is nervous about her ability to speak English, you can go to the polls with her and translate. And I think people maybe feel that there are barriers that are surmountable, and they don't know that they can overcome them. And so that's the thing too, is I think if it feels intimidating and if it feels like maybe it's hard or it's something maybe you don't have the right things, you know, we've got 30 days left till early voting. We've got plenty of time until election day. You know, try to figure out whatever it is that you think is maybe blocking you or your family or your community members, and figure out the way around them, because you should be able, again, it's your right to vote. You should access those, and you know, your friends and your family and your neighbors should too. So take the time, take the next month or two and really dig into what you need to do to be able to vote. Because I never want people to feel like that too, like they can't vote. And that's it. And I will now throw it over to Jeffrey.
Oh, wow. You know, I'm like Kelly, you know, once I get started, I mean, Jesus, I really hate hearing that. You know, I hear it all the time. Y'all have heard it too. I'm just one vote. My vote won't count, won't matter. Or what about this one? The white folks gonna do what they gonna do anyway. I heard that from so many people. And these are so many excuses given by particularly people of color, African Americans, when it comes to exercising the right to vote. And when you think about the fact that this was such a major part of the civil rights history of African Americans in this country, it's baffling for me how Black people particularly can turn a blind eye to the struggle that it took to obtain the right to vote. And you think about all of the things that people in power are doing to disenfranchise and limit the ability for people to vote. I mean, you think about, this is the first election, 2020, that straight ticket voting is going to not be in play. So that means that everybody has to go down that ballot and choose their candidates. But there's a reason why that was signed into law back in 2017, because they wanted to stifle the gains that Democrats particularly had seen. You know, I know this is not a Democrat-Republican thing, but Democrats over the last 4 presidential cycles from 2004 to 2016, the last presidential election, they saw in Harris County, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roxanne, straight ticket voting increased from like 29% to 35%, and Republicans saw a decrease from 34 to 30%. I know in my county, Fort Bend County, Republicans had a slight increase in straight ticket voting from 31 to 36%, but Democrats saw an even greater increase in straight ticket voting from 25 to 39% roughly. And so when you think about all of these populous counties, you see Democrats saw an increase in straight ticket voting over the last 4 presidential cycles. So, you know, I think it's important to realize that there's a reason why Trump and his minions shut down the post office and was trying to you know, remove the post office boxes in select neighborhoods. And you see the pushback on absentee ballots and mail-in ballots that is at play, where you have Attorney General of of Texas suing to stop Harris County from doing it and various other places. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why are they preventing? Why did they institute poll taxes back in the day? Why did they have literacy tests back in the day? Why did they have Jim Crow laws and all of these various things that were in place to disenfranchise and segregate African Americans from whites and others, and you just have and stop them from voting? You had the Ku Klux Klan that rose to power when blacks gained significant gains after Reconstruction or during Reconstruction. Blacks became governors and senators and had major positions. And then the Ku Klux Klan rose and started, burning the crosses and doing the night rides and even kidnapping people from their homes and even lynching, African Americans. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why is there such a push to stop Black people from voting and to stop them from registering to vote and to try to make them? It's almost like, to me, to a large degree, many African Americans have Stockholm syndrome. It's almost, we have this, this trust factor for those that oppressed us for so many years, and not understanding that we can be free. We can be the Harriet Tubmans of the world and try to free others, but we have to do our part in order to change things, and voting is a major part of that. Pass it on to Kelly.
You dropped the mic again.
No, come on, Kelly. It's your turn.
I think Kelly started that. So
I thought Roxanne started it. I'm sorry.
No, Kelly started it.
Go ahead, Layle.
So we
well, hold on. I'm gonna jump in real quick and just commend the office of Chris Hollins, where Roxanne works and where she's representing that office. But I just want to commend you guys for the number of polling locations that we have this year. Like, it's incredible. And
we
there are
120 early voting locations, which is 3 times the amount we had in 2016. So don't wait till election day.
And 7 locations will be open for 24 hours on Thursday, October 29th. So even if you're a night owl, or even if you work overnight, or you work all day, and
no excuse.
There's no excuse.
No,
Like,
yes.
you have to make it happen. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have, so that too, when I say the impact here, like Texas is not known for its willingness to give people the right to vote, but when you have local leaders that are, these kind of changes happen. We also have 10 locations that are going to have drive-through voting. I liken it to a Sonic. You pull up, you vote. But this election is historic. We're hoping not just for turnout, but in the ways people can vote. And one of the things too I wanted to say is we do have one of the longest ballots in the country, and I want to remind people who might be watching too that you cannot bring this in with you. You can't bring a phone in, but you can bring a piece of paper, your handwritten notes. And so I want to remind people to do that, but definitely hoping people take advantage of those 120 early voting sites. We'll have over 800 on election day. So we're, that 24-hour voting for our first responders, our nurses, our shift workers, our college students who just are up at 2 o'clock in the morning, for everybody. So we're definitely trying to get everyone access.
And you all are at NRG and Toyota Center as well.
We are at NRG Arena, we are at Toyota Center, we are at TSU, we are at U of H, we are at the food bank. You are gonna not be able to throw a rock this election season and not be able to hit one of our polling locations.
So now we just have to get everybody mobilized into the polls. Like, there's no excuse now. And I think the key to that is gonna be the education piece. People need to be educated about where they can vote, what they need, and also so that they're not overwhelmed by the ballot, making sure and organizations like the ones that we represent need to make sure that we get the word out about the people that are on the ballot, so that everyone will, be an informed voter. I think that can be intimidating. As you said, we have one of the longest ballots in the country. And I think that can be somewhat intimidating, especially since we can't vote straight ticket.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one final question for our group, unless there are questions in our chat. But before I do that, I want to just say also that the League of Women Voters has an excellent resource. They have a printed and an electronic resource. And I will post that in the comments later when this is over. I'll also post the early voting times in this conversation when we finish, so that you can access it all in the same place where we are right now. And my last question, which might be a little bit of a hotbed question, but we're gonna go for it anyway, is this election, this 2020 presidential election, is this election about policy or about morality? And so I'm gonna start with my friend Layle, who doesn't want to talk.
Oh my goodness. So I would have to answer it in a very council member Jeffrey L. Boney way. It's an and situation, you know, it's both. The policies that we've seen roll back have been crazy. A lot of folks have worked hard to make things happen, and those things have been rolled back. And then also, let me see, I got a day job that requires me to be real square. So let me say, we have some morality issues as well. And I'm just gonna have to leave the question alone because I'm not as free as I would like to be to say what I like to say. But whoa, yeah, it is important that we exercise our right to vote so that we can see the change that we need to see in the White House and beyond. I gotta go. I'm gonna give it to Roxanne.
Good job.
Is this about morality or policy? And I'm gonna say, yes, it is. Because and not just at the presidency level, but everywhere, our morality is at stake. But if we don't have policies to back up the things that we say, it means nothing. We can talk all day long about how kids should not be in cages at our borders, but if we can't put in policy that allows refugees and immigrants to come into this country, then we're still morally, not where we need to be. Too, as a member of the LGBTQ community for years, people were told, oh, I don't like gay people. I mean, I love gay people, but they just shouldn't get married. If your policy can't match your morals, it doesn't match. If we have kids going to bed hungry every night, our policies aren't meeting the needs of our community. Our minimum wage is still $7 an hour. Are you kidding me? So we do have morals so far at stake, and I definitely think that's the most pressing issue. But I think that we can never forget that our policies and the structural institutions that we have in place need to match those morals, or else it's all for show. I'm gonna pass it over to Kelly.
Thank you. Well, I like my sorority sister Layle, I work for a nonprofit organization, so we're definitely bipartisan as it relates to what we can and can't say. But I can definitely say that I do personally, Kelly P. Hodges, feel that it is this is a moral election. I think there are some horrible, awful things that have taken place in the last 4 years. And we need to make a change in the White House. And we need to make a change. We need to make a change like 3.5 years ago. But we definitely need to make a change. I think it's definitely about morals. And I think that if we get the right person in the White House, or right persons, the policies will fall into place. And I'll pass it over to you, Tracy.
I am going to defer to Jeff so that I can be last and we can wrap up.
Well, let me just say, I believe that as an African-American male and just African-Americans in general, we're facing two pandemics right now. One has been around since the inception, racism, and the other one is, of course, COVID-19, of which I'm a survivor. We're at a crossroads, a major crossroads right now. And this election is critical. If there was ever time to vote, that time is now. And whether it's public policy or whether it's morality, You just need to get to the polls and you need to vote. And, the thing about it is we have a president currently who single-handedly emboldened the worst elements of society to openly express their racist and bigoted views in ways that I haven't ever seen in my lifetime in America, and I don't believe have been this exposed since the days of the civil rights struggle. The current administration under number 45, I don't even like to say his name, it shined a light on the darkness of racism and bigotry. It's been ignored in this country. It's been swept under the rug in this country. There's been a Band-Aid put over it, but this divisive rhetoric and this activity that the current administration continues to boldly encourage, it's now trickled down to many cities, many states across this country. The reason that I decided to run for political offices, I didn't want what I saw coming to 1600 Pennsylvania to trickle down to Missouri City, Texas. Sadly, some of that is starting to rear its ugly head now, which is why I believe not only voting in the federal election, but voting in local and state elections is extremely important. I'll just end with this, because it was a kind of a follow-up to that other question also about Blacks not voting or people not voting. I believe that it's a detrimental outcome for Black people if we choose to completely disengage. You got some people who are pushing this rhetoric and this narrative about not voting at all and earning the vote. That's fine. Okay, if you choose not to vote because your candidate wasn't the candidate of choice or your person wasn't your person. But if you disengage from the political process and choose not to vote, it's still going to be a costly one, because a non-vote is still relevant and is just as powerful, in my opinion, as a vote that you didn't cast. So, whoever it is that you didn't vote for or that you did vote for, whatever the case may be, whoever's elected is going to make decisions. We have a president that, if reelected, is going to have the power to appoint a Supreme Court justice, because Ms. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, God bless her, may not be around for another 4 years. And if that's the case, I'm not talking about death, I'm talking about potential retirement. And so he's going to be able to completely shift the dynamics of the Supreme Court. And, we are federal judges and various other things. So, if that doesn't do something to you, if that doesn't motivate you to get to the polls, to realize that your livelihood and your quality of life is going to be impacted, especially if he has another 4 years to do whatever with no worries about being reelected, I think that should force you to get to the polls.
Thank you. I will answer the question and then I will wrap us up, tie a bow around it. I for the first time in my voting years, feel like this is a moral election. I felt up until now that I could disagree politically and not feel any particular way about that disagreement. That you could choose your place in the world and I could choose my place in the world, and I would not see that as a value judgment about who you are. This time, I do not feel that way. This time, I believe, and I'm just speaking for Tracy, again, first person, that if you see things the way they are right now, and you desire to keep them the way they are right now, that is a value I do not hold. And so for me, this, for the first time in my voting life, is a moral election. So with that, I will invite us in a sort of round robin. I'll start with, we'll go Roxanne, Layle, Jeff, Kelly. Any last words for our group and for the listening population?
I really want to take a second, Tracy, to just thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm very, very used to talking about the logistics and in my head part of it. And so coming, I think, in this capacity has been really, really wonderful. I hope everyone else has found it the same. But, into putting a little bit of both hats on, I do want to also just take one last second to not just to encourage people to vote, but to vote early if you can. Vote by mail if you're eligible, but definitely if you can vote early, we've got 18 days of it. There's a lot of time. And it will help, I think, all of us get out there and vote. So, not just to have your voice heard, but to do it early, to encourage the people around you, and to keep up the conversations around it. And thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Roxanne. Layle?
So I'm super geeked, I guess, no other way to put it, about the election and the outcome of such, so much so that I will be taking off the day after the election, just in case folks are not happy. But I want to implore everyone to exercise their right to vote. Whichever way you want to go, just vote. It's too much riding on it. If you travel internationally, you know that America is not always thought of fondly like we think we are, but now we are like the bottom. And so I don't want us to be there. I don't want us to continue to be there. I don't want to be that American girl in Paris and they're looking at me like, oh my God, what an idiot. She can't speak French and she's American. She's just a dummy. And so we just really lost our place as a world leader, among other things. And so I want us to do our part to make our world better, to make our lives better, to make our cities, our counties, our municipalities better. And we can do that. We got to get out there and get it. No other way around it. Jeff.
Well, I just want to thank you, Layle McKelvey, and the Omicron Tau Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated for inviting myself, as well as allowing the Nu chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated to be a part of this important discussion, and to be a part of it with as the sole male amongst a bunch of powerful and progressive women. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of that. I just want to leave with this. It's time for us to dig in. I mean, we got to get in the fight. We got to embrace, our precious right to vote. I mean, which was paid for with a hefty price. More importantly, I think the fight to protect those precious voting rights that is being fought for on a daily basis. Of course, Roxanne talked about that. We have a lot of struggles and things that we're fighting for. But for those who understand that struggle, we can make a difference through politics and public policy. And it's not a time to embrace non-voting. It's not a time to stay at home. It's time to make a conscious decision to not stay at home and to avoid not casting a ballot in 2020 in the November election. It's time to vote, and it's time to do so because America is on the ballot for 2020, not just Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
Thank you, Jeff. Kelly? You're on mute, sis.
I want to thank you, Tracy, so much for coordinating this and allowing us to have this platform to talk about the importance of voting. And thank you to my sorority sister, Layle, for coordinating this on behalf of our chapter, the best chapter in the Houston area, Omicron Tau Omega, that little old chapter in spring, as they like to call us. But we are doing big things in spring. I want to encourage everyone to educate yourself before you go to the polls. Know your candidates, know what you're voting for, who you're voting for, know what that candidate is about. Be an informed voter. And then I want to encourage everyone to vote early. It's so easy and so simple, and don't be frightened by the pandemic. I had an experience this weekend. I was very traumatized, but I had to go support my best friend. One of my best friend's sons started at UT football, and I was just like, oh my God, I thought I was gonna have a panic attack just walking up to the stadium, but I was okay and everything was in place. I felt safe and I felt comfortable. So just keep that in mind, and do know that precautions will be in place. Don't be frightened by the pandemic, because that's what they want. And I say they, you know who I mean when I say they. Go to the polls and bring two people with you. You may have a neighbor, Miss Johnson or Mr. Johnson, that don't have a way to get to the polls. Go bring two people with you to the polls. Make it a family event. Bring the kids out so that they can experience this. This is one of the most important elections of our lifetime. And I encourage everyone to be involved and be engaged in the entire process, because as First Lady Michelle Obama said, we need to vote because our our lives do depend on it. And we need to just encourage one another and continue to get the word out in our communities and to educate our communities. Make sure all the great information Harris County is doing, it's wonderful. But if we're not getting it out there, if people don't know we have 24-hour polling locations, it's not going to help. They don't know we have over 100 locations that are going to do early voting. It's not going to help. So Roxanne, I encourage your office to work with a lot of the community-based organizations, get us the information so we can help, you know, and continue to be boots on the ground, especially my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and Omega Psi Phi Fraternity. We have been in this battle a long time, and we have a great presence in the community. So use us. And thank you again, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who is here with us today, here in our Zoom panel, and also watching live on Facebook, and those who will join us later from wherever they are. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your voice in this conversation. I also am a member of a sorority that I did not shout out. I am, as they might say, inactive these days, but I don't want that to make anybody feel bad. And, you know, I just want you to know that I too am a member of a sorority. It would be the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Just so that we're clear on where I stand on that matter. Everybody rep your set. It's okay.
It's all right.
Listen, so, you know, this suffrage situation is deep here on this panel. I love you, each of you, as people, as friends, as family. I am grateful for your presence here today. I'm grateful for everything that you shared. And I will also echo the sentiments. Do not wait until election day. Vote early. Do not vote often, as was indicated earlier by somebody else who is not here. Vote one time. You only get one vote.
Per election.
Yes, per election. Somebody said it who will not be named in this conversation, but vote one time in this election. Vote early. And again, we'll share resources in the comments so that you don't have to go far to find them. Everybody go gear up for the verses, or go back to the Who Dat Nation or wherever you would like to be next. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Y'all have a good week.